Hello and welcome to On The Money, a weekly show that aims to help you make the most out of your savings and investments. So in this episode, we're going to focus on Interactive Investor's market-leading Great British Retirement Survey, which is based on answers from 9,000 people across the UK. It's been going a number of years now. It was first launched in 2019, and we publish a very comprehensive report, which I'll include a link to within the podcast description. Joining me to discuss some of the key findings and what could be done to improve the culture and education around pensions is Craig Rickman, Personal Finance Editor at Interactive Investor. Craig, great to have you back on the podcast for the second successive week.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Great to be back on.
So Craig, you've been part of the team that have put a lot of time and dedication into compiling the report this year. Given that we try and keep this podcast to around 20 to 30 minutes, I think it's best that we summarise 4 of the main findings and then talk through how each of these issues could be addressed in order to improve people's financial position and also improve financial resilience. So Craig, let's kick off with the finding that there's a lack of confidence in the pension system. So the survey found that frequent changes to pension rules and taxes are undermining trust in the pension system. Just to give some examples of that, 1 in 4 respondents said that they feel empowered to save more into their pension if the rules stop changing. And 1 in 3 millennials said that this was also a key concern of theirs. So Craig, how can this situation improve? What needs to happen for people to have more confidence in the pension system?
Well, I think that this sort of lands at the feet of the government, really. As you said, there have been lots and lots of changes, particularly to pension tax in recent years. I mean, last year is a really, really good example. So in 2024, in April, the lifetime allowance, which was a sort of a ceiling on how much your pension could be worth before you were hit with some pretty hefty tax charges, that was officially scrapped. And so savers would have reacted to that and, changed their behaviour as a result. And then 6 months later, we had the proposal to bring pensions into the scope of inheritance tax from April 2027. So, this sort of constant changing of the goalposts, it risks disincentivising savers. And that's clear from some of the results of the survey. So sort of the first task for the government is to try and, deliver some consistency to the pension tax framework. We're already sort of seeing another example of the potential, pitfalls of not doing that at the moment in the lead up to this year's autumn budget. The rumour mill is sort of running wild yet again through fear of changes to pension tax, notably around the tax-free lump sum, but also upfront tax relief as well. And so savers are concerned that the rules are going to change, then, it's going to make them, less likely to want to engage with their pension. So I think that's really the first port of call for the government. And I think we should also note that pensions, or one of the main reasons that people choose pensions is because of the tax advantages. That's why they choose them over other vehicles. If they're gradually eroded, then naturally it's going to put people off using them. And the tax advantages don't just encourage people to save, but they encourage people to save more than what they perhaps would have done before. So yeah, that's one for the government. I think what we'd really like to see is some commitment to leave the pension tax system alone for the time being. I mean, that's the sort of the private pension space. The state pension as well. We know there's a lot going on with that. There's a newly launched review on the state pension age, and we appreciate that could change. But the sooner that we get the outcomes of this, the better. Because again, if people don't know when they're going to receive their state pension, or it's unclear when they're going to receive it, then that can affect how they engage sort of with their retirement plans as well. So yeah, this is something that we're urging the government to do.
Changes to the pension system, and indeed speculation that there may be potential changes, particularly in the run-up to a budget, it just dents confidence. I mean, ultimately, if you're investing in a pension, you're investing for your financial future in later life. It's a long-term horizon that you need to adopt. Yet, in terms of policies, there's a lot of short-termism going around and, the constant shifting of the goalposts, I just find it deeply unhelpful. I mean, whatever your political persuasion is, the Labour Party have backed themselves into a corner by saying that they're not going to raise income tax, VAT, or national insurance on working people. And that's why there are lots of rumours and they may be looking at potential changes to the pension system because they need to balance the books. In my view, any government should be trying to encourage more people to take responsibility and take control of their financial future and to consider how much they're investing into a pension and then work out whether the amount that they're actually investing, whether that's going to be enough to give them what they need and what they want to do at retirement. I also think, Craig, what doesn't help is there's been a constant sort of game of musical chairs with the pension minister post. Since Steve Webb stepped down in 2015, I was looking before we came on the podcast, there's been 8 different pension ministers. And I think that's deeply unhelpful. Maybe it's viewed as a bit of a junior position within government and a stepping stone onto potentially other things. As I've mentioned, investing in a pension, it's a long-term game. And I think that with pension policy, the same long-term mindset should be adopted. Now, the next finding that we're going to cover from our survey is the lack of financial knowledge. Now, there's lots to unpack here. So just to give some examples, so our Great British Retirement Survey found that only 1 in 15, 7%, said that they received sufficient financial education in school. And we also found that 2/3 said that they'd have liked to have more financial education in school. And we also found in our survey that older workers, they risk making poor retirement decisions due to their lack of financial knowledge. So, Craig, how can the lack of financial knowledge be addressed?
Well, I think the first thing to say on that, this is something that the government has recognised and is kind of seeking to help in some shape or form with its targeted support regime, which will be available to providers from April next year. And this will allow pension providers to sort of guide people towards suitable financial products and decisions. So that's a good thing. But beyond that, there is obviously a lot more that can be done. If you look at the sort of going to the roots of it, financial education in schools, trying to expand that, broaden it to include things around pensions. So how pensions work, how the state pension works, how tax relief works, scams as well. We know that's still a big problem. So better financial education will could have a big impact, but that will only support future savers. So the other part is to what to do about it now. So obviously targeted support is one element, and we'll have to see what happens with that. The other is wake up packs. So these are currently sent at age 50. And essentially, they're designed to just to give people a bit of a jolt, really, to say that your retirement will be approaching at some point in the next however many years. So for those who are 50 at the moment, they'll be receiving their state pension at age 67, but we know that some may want to retire before that. So it's designed to give them a bit of a jolt to engage with their pension savings and get themselves in a position in later life where they can retire on their own terms. But they're sent at age 50, and while that gives people some time to make a difference to later life, you kind of think that giving them some extra time would be beneficial. I mean, there's a huge difference between saving and engaging with your pension over 17 years compared to 27 years, for instance, if the wake-up packs were sent at age 40. So I think that could make a big difference. And the other is to try and unpack and kind of get away from financial jargon. I think the industry has made some pretty big improvements to this over the years, but there's still a long way to go. And people who are probably not as or haven't been as familiar with their finances as others may find it difficult to try and pick apart what the terms mean. And so to try and simplify it and make it easier to understand for people, will make a big difference. And that's obviously something that isn't just on the government, that's on providers like us as well, interactive investor, and that's something that we're trying to do.
Well, I completely agree. I'd love to see financial education adopted in all secondary schools. I think, obviously not just investment, but other key personal finance topics as well. I mean, some of the topics are, a bit too far away to think about. Like, obviously when you leave school, you're not going to instantly buy a house. It's going to take time to build a pot of money up to get a house deposit. But I think, concepts like compounding, I think it can really help to, obviously, you leave school, you can get a credit card quite quickly and quite easily. I think it's an important concept to learn is how debts can accumulate and how they can grow over time. I think a lot of people find that out to their cost later on without knowing that that's going to happen.
Yeah, well, that actually happened to me when I was 18. It was something that I wrote about a couple of years ago. I got a call from my bank who said, "Would you like a credit card?" I said yes. And then, fast forward 6 months and I'd racked up, a level of debt that was unmanageable for me. I was still studying and I was doing a bit of part-time work, but the part-time work was barely covering the interest. So, I mean, at the end, my parents had to bail me out. And it was, I had to pay them back. They didn't just let me totally off the hook. But it was an important lesson to learn. But it's something that if I'd have had the correct education at school or just better education around finances at school, it's something that I could have been avoided. And I guess it's something that would have happened to a lot of other people and could have been more severe. I mean, I managed to catch it fairly early, but it could have been worse. And yeah, I totally agree with what you say. That really does illustrate the importance of people having a good grip because, yeah, with credit cards and the level of interest rates that are charged, debt can snowball really, really quickly. So, yeah, I couldn't agree more with that point.
Another thought I had, Craig, in terms of improving financial education is related to when you have a child or have children. So I remember when our first was born and we were given like a bag that had some vouchers in. It was things like getting a couple of quid off nappies. I mean, they were obviously gratefully received that. But I remember when I got that bag, I was thinking it would be great if there was some information in there regarding how to save and how to invest for a child, because I think that's a real key thing for a new parent to consider. Obviously not in the first couple of weeks when you're full of sleep deprivation, but at some point down the line in the first year or years, I think it's important, if you can, to save your child's financial future and to make some investment decisions regarding that. And also, I think there should be more education around the importance of using the stocks and shares junior ISA version as opposed to the cash junior ISA version. I've not looked at the latest stats, but the last time I covered it, there was a greater proportion chosen in the cash version of the junior ISA, which to me shows that just must be around lack of awareness that over an 18-year time period, the history books do indeed show the likelihood is your investment returns are going to beat cash.
Yeah, so I think you've touched on something really important there because, when you have a child, that's one of the most important times to review your finances, isn't it? Not just looking out for saving, investing for their future, but making sure that you've got enough financial protection should anything happen to you as well. So, so education around that point is so important. So, yeah, I couldn't agree more with that point.
We're next going to move on to the third finding that we're going to cover from our survey, which is the pension gaps for women and divorcees. So of the around 9,000 people surveyed, women expect to have saved £150,000 on average when they get to retirement, compared to £250,000 for men. Divorced respondents expect just £75,000 on average by retirement, and that's compared to £350,000 for married respondents. Craig, what can be done to try and narrow these very large gaps?
Well, I think part of the answer lies in the auto-enrolment framework. So what we know is that women typically take more time off work to have children, to care for elderly parents, sometimes both at the same time. And so auto-enrollment, which is the workplace pension initiative that was launched in 2012, that seems like one of the best ways to address it. And something that we could do is to reduce the auto-enrollment earnings trigger from £10,000 to £4,000. So at the moment, if you earn less than £10,000, you're not automatically enrolled into the pension scheme. Some companies may still do it, but under the rules, they don't have to. So if that was decreased down to £4,000, then that would support mainly part-time workers, which again, if women are looking after the children, which is typically what happens. I know there's been a bit of a shift around that culturally, but that is still what happens most of the time. And if they're working part-time, that will enable them to build pension wealth or have a better opportunity of building pension wealth while they've taken time out of the workplace. So I think that's something that could help.
As you mentioned, Craig, as women often take time out of the workplace in their 30s and 40s to care for young children or to take care of the parents, this has a huge knock-on impact on pension wealth later on. So they're contributing less, and then they're going to struggle to catch up to men because of investment compounding. That they're missing out on the investment gains as well as not putting the same amount of contributions in as well at the same time. It's a double whammy. And also, the fact is that women do tend to earn less on average than men, which also contributes to this pension gender pay gap. You know, we talk a lot about compounding on this podcast, which is the effect of how investment returns generate future gains and snowball over time. So if you are contributing less in your 20s and 30s, compounding isn't working as much for you as it is for people who are continually putting money into their pension and are continuing to work throughout that period. Craig, our research also found that there's a very big gap between the self-employed. Could you talk through this and what could be done to address this gap?
Pension participation among self-employed workers has been reducing for some time, or is certainly a lot lower than it was in, say, the late 90s. So in the late 90s, around half of self-employed workers actively contributed to a pension, and since it's fallen to about a fifth. So that's a big drop. I guess one thing we should mention is that you don't have to save into a pension for retirement. There are other ways to do it. So you can use ISAs. If you've built up enough of a business, that's something you could potentially use as well. You could use buy-to-let properties. So pensions aren't the only way to do it. Because of the tax advantages, they're the most popular way, and for a lot of people, probably the most effective way. So it's still a big concern. You should also note with self-employed workers that they generally have a different sort of set of circumstances than employed workers, or different considerations. So, for example, cash flow tends to be more important. So anecdotally, at least, I know of some self-employed workers who prefer to use ISAs because of the accessibility. But that said, in a lot of cases, they still need to be thinking longer ahead. So trying to encourage more self-employed workers to engage with pensions is a big task. And I think that one of the main things is increasing awareness. There's a lot of information, there's a lot of help out there, from PensionWise to Citizens Advice Bureau, regulated financial advisors too. So I think part of the job is to just increase awareness and try and point self-employed workers in the right direction. The other thing is again going back to auto-enrollment, which we'll probably cover quite a lot in this, is to try and find a way of expanding auto-enrollment to self-employed workers. Now, obviously, there are some practical challenges there. There's no fixed salary to deduct pension contributions from. That's the main one. There's no workplace to pay the money in. Self-employed workers tend to have irregular earnings. So any kind of system, auto-enrollment system, would have to factor those things in. I think this is an area that the government looked at a few years ago, but nothing sort of further went with it. But I think it's the time to revisit it, because the risk is, if self-employed workers are reaching retirement with insufficient savings, then we could be reaching a real crisis point. Many may wish to continue working, but if they're doing physical and manual jobs, that may not be possible. So I think this is, I guess, everything, any of the sort of pension gaps and potential looming pension problems need to be solved. But this is certainly one of the biggest that the government and perhaps the wider industry too needs to tackle.
And our fourth topic, in which I'm pretty sure we're going to cover auto-enrolment further, our survey found that low pension values are very commonplace across the UK. So the survey found that 6 in 10 pension savers expect to fall short of a moderately comfortable retirement, anticipating pension wealth of less than 300,000. Older workers have the lowest expectations. 2/3 of those in their early 60s expect pension wealth of less than 300,000, compared with 53% of those in their 20s. So Craig, before we talk about what can be done to try and improve the situation, let's firstly take a step back. I think it's very helpful for listeners to know, what are the ballpark figures for a comfortable retirement? So Pensions UK, which rebranded recently, it was formerly called the Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association. They publish their pension projections for a minimum, moderate and comfortable retirement. Could you talk us through those projections, Craig, and are they a good target to aim for?
Sure. So let's have a look. So Pensions UK crunch these numbers every year, and they look at 3 different levels of retirement lifestyle. So minimum, moderate and comfortable. So, and this is the cost in retirement. So this is what you would need after you've paid tax. So this is what you would need money going into your bank account. So the minimum amount that you would need, and so this would be a very frugal retirement, let's say, that's 13,400 a year. To live a moderate retirement, it's 31,700, and for a comfortable retirement, it's 43,900 pounds a year. So that's for a single person. If you're in a couple, then clearly you need more than that. So these figures assume that we assume that you would get the full state pension. You can translate those into pot sizes, which is how, what most people will be aiming for when they set a target. So to accumulate enough pension savings for a moderate retirement, you would need somewhere between 330 and 490,000 pounds. For a comfortable retirement, somewhere between 540,000 and 800,000. The reason for the sort of wide range there is because of annuity rates, and we know that this is what it's based on, and we know that those can change over time. So are they a good target? I mean, in reality, they're a guide more than anything else. They're just a guide to help people think a bit more carefully about the type of lifestyle that they want in retirement. For some people, having £30,000 a year, they'd see that as more than comfortable to live on. Others may need a lot more than that. That will depend on the lifestyle that you want in retirement, and will probably also be dictated by how much you've been earning during your working years as well, because most people will want a smoothish transition to retirement. I think one thing it does illustrate is the importance of getting the full state pension, which is currently just under £12,000. So as you can see, that would almost cover off the minimum amount that you would need for retirement. Again, that's a minimum, or it could take a really big chunk out of the amount of savings that you would need to fund either a moderate or a comfortable retirement. But I think that, the thing is to get people thinking about what sort of retirement do I want, and how much money will I need to be able to do the things that I want to do as an individual or as a married couple.
So Craig, what could be done to improve this situation of course, auto-enrolment was introduced around 15 years ago. It's undoubtedly been a success. I don't think you could argue against that. Is it now time for a rethink in terms of the amount that workers put into their pensions and the amount that employers contribute? So at the moment, for those that qualify, every monthly paycheck, employees put in at least 5% and employers put in 3%. Craig, how much more does this need to go up by in order to address the risk of people not saving enough for their retirement?
So yes, I mean, as you say, auto-enrolment has been a great success in getting more people to save. But the concern now is that people aren't saving enough if they stick to those minimum amounts that you said, which is between employee and employer is 8%. We should also note that's 8% of qualifying earnings as well, which are earnings between, it's just over £6,000 up to the higher rate tax threshold, which is 50,270. Some employers will pay based on, your full pay. There are different ways of doing it, but under the rules, that's the minimum amount, and that's what some employers will adhere to. Yeah, so the thinking is that the minimums need to increase. There are some challenges around that at the moment for both employees and employers. So for employers, they're facing higher tax bills from April with the national insurance changes, the national insurance threshold being reduced and the headline rate or the headline main rate being increased. So they're facing stiffer tax bills. So to lump them with extra pension contributions for their employees might not be particularly welcome. And for employees, they're still battling against the rising cost of living. Inflation has come down significantly from the dizzying double-digit heights that we saw a few years ago, but it's still far higher than the Bank of England's 2% target. So prices are still rising a lot faster than we would like. And so again, if they were to be paying more into their pensions or being paying more into their pensions by law, there is a risk that it could increase the number of people opting out of pensions altogether. So that sort of balance needs to be struck. But I think the minimum rates do need to go up. And I think we think they should go up to 12%, but this should be phased in over a period of time. And the government has said that nothing, or auto-enrolment rates aren't going to change during this parliament. But then beyond that, to increase them, so maybe uptick the minimum contributions by 1% a year over a period of 4 years will increase what people are paying into their pensions and boost their future financial security, and in a way that's palatable for both companies and their staff. Something else that they could do would be to expand auto-enrolment to younger people. So it's currently age 22 is the minimum age that you're enrolled into a pension scheme. But it would be helpful if that was lowered to age 18 to encourage sort of more school leavers to save into retirement. Like a point that you made earlier around investing compounding, the earlier that people can start to save for retirement, the better.
And as well as potentially increasing the minimum contribution for your pension under auto-enrolment from current levels of 8% to potentially 12%. For me, financial education is as we mentioned earlier on in the podcast, it's an important part of the messaging of helping people understand the importance of saving towards their retirement. And I think if financial education was strengthened, then there would be less opt-outs in terms of pensions, and also people would potentially put more money into their pension if they understood the importance of compounding, how their pension contributions benefit from tax relief, and how the employer contributions help to top up what you're putting into your pension. So our Great British Retirement Survey, it is a sober read. However, we hope that the issues that we've highlighted and how they could be addressed has provided plenty of food for thought. As I mentioned in the introduction, I'll provide a link to our report below the episode description.
Yeah, and if you found anything interesting in the findings that you'd like us to cover in the future, then get in touch by emailing us at otm@ii.co.uk.
Well, that's all we have time for today. My thanks to Craig, and thank you for listening to this episode of On the Money. If you enjoyed it, please do follow the show in your podcast app and please spread the word. And if you get a chance, please leave a review or a rating in your preferred podcast app too. So those ratings and reviews, they really help to get the podcast into more ears. So if you could spare the time to give us that 5-star review, I'd really appreciate it. We love to hear from you, and you can get in touch by emailing otm@ii.co.uk. And in the meantime, you can find more information and practical pointers on how to get the most out of your investments on the Interactive Investor website, ii.co.uk. And I'll see you next week.